offer. And these are this is quite a remarkable group of talented individuals, and you're about to see that. I'm sure you're going to be amazed and awed at what you're about to witness. Thank you. Hello, everybody. We sure are excited to be here. We're the West Point Hellcats from the United States Military Academy. We're positioned 50 miles north of New York City along the Hudson River. I'd like to bring the guys on the stage and introduce everyone. My name is Master Sergeant Jeff Prosperie, and I serve as the principal drummer and section leader of the percussion section. And on behalf of our superintendent, Robert Caslin, and General Robert Caslin, and our commander, Lieutenant Colonel Todd Addison, we're delighted to be here, as well as thankful to our element leader, Sergeant Major John Manning. We're going to explore Pratt. We all know who Pratt is, right? John or Jack Pratt, John Sterling Pratt, known as Jack Pratt to his friends. So what we'd like to do this evening is explore the influences on Pratt and then the influences of Pratt on the percussion community. He, along with 200 individuals, including Fred Sanford, Dennis DeLucia, and Jack Pratt, are 3 marching percussion specialists who were inducted into the Percussive Arts Society Hall of Fame. We're very proud as Hellcats that 2 of the 3 inducted into the Hall of Fame were former Hellcats. Dennis DeLucia was a Hellcat as well as Jack Pratt. So we'd like to explore that. Going to turn over the mic a little bit and give it over to Master Sergeant Willie Calohan. He'll tell you who he is. Before he does that, I'll tell you I'm from Louisiana. I'm not really from up north. Trying to adapt to the winter each year is a challenge, and not having my regular fix of crawfish and alligator is a big challenge as well. But I come from Louisiana, got my undergrad at LSU, and did my master's and doctorate work at the University of North Texas. Drum Corps affiliations include the Bayonne Regiment, Star of Indiana, and Phantom Regiment, and I've been in the Hellcats for 11.5 years.
Thank you, Jeff. My name is Master Sergeant William Calohan, and I've been with the Hellcats for 13 years now, which makes me feel old. I'm originally from Virginia, and my kind of rudimental drumming background just includes some advanced level indoor drumline when I was in high school, and I did college marching band at James Madison University, marching Royal Dukes, and just had a lot of drum corps friends and learned a lot of tricks along the way. So that's kind of a little bit about me.
Hi, my name is Sergeant First Class Andrew Porter, and I've been with the Hellcats for 13 years now. Willie and I were actually hired on the same audition. We both wore red tennis shoes, that's why we won. I went to Western Kentucky University for undergraduate and Louisiana State University for a master's degree. Yeah, go Tigers. Actually worked with Jeff briefly while I was down there because he was teaching at University of Louisiana Lafayette, so we actually played in Baton Rouge Symphony together once or twice. Prior to that, my drum corps experience includes the Bluecoats Drum and Bugle Corps and Winter Drumline with Music City Mystique.
Good afternoon. I'm Master Sergeant Bill Cuthbert. I am from Illinois, southwest of Chicago, and I've been in the band here for going on 11 years. I graduated from Illinois State University, and my drum corps affiliation is with Pioneer Drum and Bugle Corps and Phantom Regiment.
All right. We're very pleased and delighted to have our bugle section here, at least 3 members of the bugle section. In the center is Sergeant First Class Jeremy Wiesner of Michigan, but we just call him Wheezy or Sergeant Wheezy. That's his nickname. And to his left is Sergeant First Class Chris Venditti from Pennsylvania, Juilliard grad, I believe, right? Did you go to Juilliard? Yep. So we had to teach him about marching arts when he got to the Hellcats, and, from the concert hall to the field. It's next clinic for us. And our newest bugler in the section, Staff Sergeant. Oh, well, we just got a new one like 2 weeks ago, sorry, but he is not active yet. He doesn't count yet, so we're delighted to have Staff Sergeant Jillian Huff from Georgia. So let's give it up for the buglers for being here. So, of course, the West Point Point connection to Pratt. If you've ever looked at his book, 14 Contest Solos, which everyone probably should know about, if you're a rudimental enthusiast or novice or professional, you should have this in your library, I believe. And this is studied in most university curriculums and even high schools and state list for solo ensemble. On the cover of this book is Pratt, and look what he's wearing. He's wearing the same thing I'm wearing, pretty much, right? Yep, so that's the Hellcat uniform. And one of the influences on Pratt, of course, was serving at West Point, and we'll get into more specifics, but I'd like to play now. We're going to perform for you what we normally do at our job. People ask us, what do you do at your job? Well, we do a lot of different stuff. Anything from meal formations, waking up the cadets and the Corps cadets in the morning, and playing reveille and 3 camps in the Civil War routine with the Austrian, the Hessian. We still do that. We are the Army's only remaining field music group, and we still carry on those traditions that were first established when George Washington established West Point. When he established West Point, there was a fifer and drummer, and we have the oldest drum job continuing in this country, and we still carry on those traditions. Besides daily drills of marching formations, breakfast formation, lunch and dinner, we also rehearse the cadets as they march around the plane for drills and parades and ceremonies so they can look their tip-top best. And we perform ceremonies, change of command ceremonies, funerals, parades, and even go on TV every now and then and dodge axes for a living. Yes, I said that. Yes, I said that. You don't know what I'm talking about? Google Fox hits drummer with axe. You'll be prepared to have your mind blown. So, a little bit about that. We're going to perform 2 pieces called Pancakes and Hippo Dipper. Our duty tempo is 116. We must perform at 116. Thus, when we perform our cadences, Crazy Army, Road to Boston, Army 2-4, we will not play 7s and 15s. So don't ask us why we're not playing 7s and 15s. That's why, because it's not functional for us. So here we go. Okay, attention. So those drum parts were pinned by Jack Pratt. And the thing that we enjoy about performing those is the compositional devices he used. It was a big departure from the standard rudimental drumming that Nard had put out before that and other organizations. His drumming took on a lot of over-the-bar line phrasing, taking a rudiment and ignoring the bar line and extending a phrase, deceptive cadences, and also just dialogues between the hands, left hand accent to the right hand accent. I'm not sure if you can see this, but one particular device that we call a palindrome, in effect, if you look at these last two measures of this piece, and you can come up and study it later, but we have A, B, B, to the jet, to the jet, to the jet, to the jet. So Pratt tends to do that a lot. If you look in his music, even in Drum Corps and Parade, we'll perform in a little while, is that compositional device. That unique phrasing that he did started to bridge the gap between orchestral, academic drummers learning in schools of music and the fife and drum corps and the modern drum corps. Started bridging all that together. So that's one of the compositional influences that we're very proud of that Pratt brought to the table. We'd like to bring up at this time some Hellcat Alum, and I will introduce those guys as they come on up. So we're going to perform Flying Dutchman with the bugles. So another composition that Pratt wrote that we perform frequently at West Point is Flying Dutchman. One of the alumni is Bill Putnam entering the stage. We first met Bill a few years ago at one of our alumni concerts at West Point. He showed up and just had a ball of energy and was so excited, and we had a great time drumming with him. And then the inspirational thing about Bill is Bill showed up and played, and he played pretty well. He's a good drummer. We're like, hey, he's a pretty good drummer. And then the next year he came back, and boom, I don't know what you did in the next year, but he just practiced a lot and came back and blew us away. And every year I've been noticing Bill is he's continuing to improve, and he's just a phenomenal drummer. I admire him, his flow, and just the musicality in Eastman grad. And we also have two former Hellcats, one that I marched with on the side of, Gus Cuccia. Gus was with the Hellcats, and he teaches the young colonials. He's also famous because he performs with some of the sports drum lines like New York Giants, I think, or New York Jets. Yeah, so he's does that gig and teaches my son with the young colonials, along with his brother, Dominick Cuccia, who is also a Hellcat, and great composer of rudimental drumming, has presented many, many clinics and performances at PASIC, and just an inspiration to us all. You saw their family performing in the various ensembles and competitions, so they're carrying that rudimental torch, and that's just a joy to see. And lastly, we have Dave Smith, who just retired from Western Connecticut as the professor of percussion. So we're proud of the ranks that have come before us, and we carry that rudimental torch proudly. Some of the people before us, like I said, was Dennis DeLucia, Bob Devlin, of course Pratt, and the list just goes on and on. So we'd like to perform for you Flying Dutchman, which is still performed on the grounds of West Point. Deceptive cadence, tension doesn't resolve until at the end. So the thing I admired about Pratt is the way he was able to create rhythmic tension and then release that and extend that tension over several bars and across beats through rudiments. we'd like to go ahead and thank and dismiss our buglers. Sergeant Weezy, take over. So, as Pratt, just a little bit about Pratt. You guys can just relax for a second. A little bit about Pratt. Started drumming when he was 10 years old. Okay? The summer going into his junior year, 1947, he decided to take a trip over to the Seneca Falls VFW and noticed a lot of patriotism and parades and things like that going on. And he met a gentleman named Norman Peth. And that began his career, which eventually took him to West Point. After he graduated high school in 1949, Eisenhower had instituted the peacetime draft, so he figured he'd go ahead and get his military service done with, and he went ahead and enlisted in November of 1949, right after graduating high school after that summer. That summer, before he enlisted, he was in the Geneva Corps, which eventually became the Geneva Apple Knockers, I believe it was. And they came out 6th in the nation at the drum corps competition. So he did march drum corps, and he eventually began to teach and write and all that. But his service at West Point began after 1949. He went to basic training, and then they screened the soldiers, and one of the sergeants said, hey, he found out he played drums, so he says, well, you need to go to the band school. So they sent young Pratt, to the band school in Fort Knox. And while he was at the band school, one of the sergeants said, you're pretty good. We're not just going to send you to a regular band. I really believe you should go and audition for the West Point band. So the sergeant said, what do you want to do with your life? And Pratt was, I don't know. I guess I'll go audition for West Point. So he went to West Point, and the audition consisted of sight reading and prepared, memorized solo. Well, he didn't have a prepared, memorized solo, so he just ad-libbed a solo and on the spot, and he won the audition. And he served from 1950 through 1969. So his full military career, 20 years, was there. While at West Point, one of our duties is to perform drills and parades and reviews where we just play beats at 116. And this drum corps and parade is the first solo out of his book, 14 Contest Solos. And we're going to perform that with our alumni friends, Drum Corps on Parade. And also, I have one more friend that I met last night. You know, drumming is so cool because we can just come together and play Downfall of Paris, Patty, Crazy Army, all these beats, which are very important. And Bill McGrath keeps stressing, you know, it's important that we play these beats. So when we get together, we can do that. So we were rehearsing Drum Corps and Parade last night with alumni, and this gentleman, Bill McDonald, was sitting there rapping it out on the table on a pad, and he sounded really good. I never met him before. And I was like, who are you? You sound great. And he said, oh, I'm instructing the Boston Crusaders alumni group, used to teach the Defenders, this and that, and he's in the Legends group. And he says, oh, I know it because the Legends group plays Drum Corps and Parade too, and they've studied our video, the Hellcat video that's on YouTube. So I said, hey man, why don't you just come up and join us? So here's Bill McDonald, my new friend. Takes me back to my Richmond days. All right. really fun. Thank you, Bill. See you next year. Stay safe. Watch that left, okay? Great smoke. Anyway. So, gentlemen, thank you for performing with us. We're going to call these guys back to the stage in a moment to perform some individual solos that Pratt wrote. So, thanks, Dominick. One interesting thing about Pratt is that after he got to West Point, you guys want to call you? Cool. We're going to reshuffle for a moment, but it's storytelling time with Uncle Jeff. So, Pratt, while he was at West Point, now 1957, about 7 years in, started writing solos. And then he wrote so many, like 150 solos, and he just sent them all out to publishing companies. And they were like, wow, that's a lot of solos. And no one bit except Bellwin, the company Bellwin, the music publishing company. But they said, that's too many solos. We need to break this stuff up into 4 books so we can make some money. So he came out with the 14 contest solos. And the solo you're going to hear coming up in a moment is My Friend Norman. Anybody ever hear of My Friend Norman? Okay, so I alluded to Norm Heth was Pratt's first drum teacher. So Pratt in 1947, that summer, going into his junior year, goes to the Seneca Falls VFW, and he sees this phenomenal drummer, and he's like, who are you? And my name's Norman Heth, and Norman had just gotten back from serving. A lot of guys came back from the war. 1947, Norman was a Coast Guard drummer. So, or he was in the Coast Guard. And he taught Pratt for the next 2 years. So that was Pratt's really first private teacher, not until he was 16 years old. Pratt joined the school band when he was 10, and he had a pretty good band director that knew how to run down the rudiments. So that was a good start. Norm was a huge influence on Pratt. Eventually, 2 years later, Norm moved over to Ohio to work with his father. And now Norm is alive, and he lives in Ocala, Florida, to my knowledge. So that's a pretty awesome story. The talented drummer that's about to come up is Willie Calohan. He marches inside of me. This is a phenomenal drummer, and he's an awesome drum set player too. And this is a very solid musician, plays perfectly in time, and keeps me honest, because I like to breathe a lot when I play. So he's the yin to my yang, and he's going to perform My Friend Norman, but he's going to talk about it first.
I'm pretty sure Jeff was just making all of that up.
Yeah.
Either that or I'm not sure what he's talking about. My personal story about My Friend Norman is that was one of the 145 things I played in my Hellcat audition so many years ago, to include 8.5-minute long 4-mallet marimba solos and sight reading on timpani and crazy things like that. But this was kind of one of those stock rudimental drumming style pieces that, of course, you would be expected to play on an audition for a group such as ours, and also tip of the cap to Pratt, much as we're doing today. So just a few things that that I like about this. First is this kind of motif that you hear in the beginning, and I'll just play it really quickly. So he kind of drops it after the first third or quarter of the piece, but it comes back like, I don't know, 5 or 6 times there in the beginning, and it's kind of a little thing that you kind of have to work through technically, but that adds a nice little pizzazz to that. Secondly, once you get about halfway into this, there's just all these sextuplets that go on for maybe, I don't know, 20 seconds or so, where it just keeps going and going, and he's varying the accent pattern. And the thing that I try to do there is just make it sound fluid. I don't know that I'll pull this off. I'm just telling you what I'm trying to do. I try to make it sound fluid and connected as possible. And the other thing that I do is I just add a backsticking in there wherever you get a double following the primary note. So if the sticking allows, I didn't add any backstickings I didn't change the sticking. So if the sticking allows, I added just a common backstick in there just for fun and try to add a little flair to it. But this is a nice little solo. I've had a lot of fun with it, and again, it takes me back to those audition days before I was a Hellcat. Now I'm an old guy in the Hellcats. It's a weird position, but anyway, I hope you enjoy my friend Norman, or as I like to say, Pratt's friend Norman. I don't know Norman. Thanks, Jeff. Thank you, Willie. So Pratt wrote this book, 1957. By 59 it was published, and the way it gained notoriety is that Warren Benson was the percussion professor at Ithaca School of Music, and he found these solos interesting. They were different. And he had a student in Ithaca named Robin Engelman. Robin was with Nexus, but he was a student of Warren Benson. So Warren Benson took it upon himself, while serving on the committee for the state music educations, that he took the solos out of the book and ranked them according to levels 5 and 6, so that students could perform them on solo ensembles. So that's a neat little story. We'll allude to that in a little while. But before that, I'd like to bring up the Cuccia brothers, because they wrote a solo based off of My Friend Norman, but it's called My Friend Jack, in tribute to Jack Pratt. One of the interesting things that when I first moved up here from Louisiana, and you learn out of a book down in the bayous and the swamps, and you say, okay, John Pratt, read these solos. Then I get up here and everyone's calling him Jack Pratt. And I'm thinking, what's that all about? Well, his friends in the close circle of people who knew and who know Jack Pratt call him Jack. The story behind that was his mother's brother had a child, and his name was John, and he had another cousin named John. They were all named John, so the mother nicknamed him Jack to kind of separate, and so that's the way Jack stuck. So I'm going to turn this over to Dominick, and you can tell us a little about your composition.
Yes, so I auditioned for the Hellcats in 1991. Gus auditioned for the Hellcats in 96, and as Willie said, the required rudimental piece was My Friend Norman. And at the time, I didn't know Jack Pratt, and he came to a muster out of the blue in Montgomery, New York. And I got to meet him, and right away we became friends. We just hit it off the first time we met. And the next year I went to PASIC, and someone says to me, hey, did you pick up the new Pratt book? There's a solo in there dedicated to you called Farmers Museum Muster. And I was just blown away that we had only met and become friends recently, and he wrote that solo for me. And a couple years later, as I was putting my book together, I thought, I want to do something as a tribute to my friend Jack. And because his music, for Gus and myself, getting into the Hellcats was an important part of our lives. And I think all the Hellcat alumni would say the same thing, and current members of the Hellcats. Pratt really is an important part of our lives, and I wanted to do something for him. And while I stand in a small shadow that Jack Pratt casts, I'm grateful to him, and it was my little tribute to him. So Gus and I are going to play My Friend Jack.
Jack Pratt's a very interesting person on many levels. He's a family man, has 4 daughters. He is an intellectual. After he left the Hellcats in 1969, those last 9 years that he was serving as a Hellcat, he was going to night school about 3 nights a week at Orange County Community College because his goal was to become an English teacher, which he did. And he graduated first in his class, and then he served as an English teacher for the next 25 years. So a lot of people always wonder what happened to Pratt after he left the Hellcats. He became a very successful English teacher and president of the New Jersey Poets Society. And that intrigued Robin Engelman. So that relationship with Robin started to develop over the years. Pratt was also very influential in the Swiss drumming vocabulary and movement coming to the United States. In the late 60s, he brought over Alphonse Grieter and some Swiss drummers to work with the Hellcats. And as a result, we started seeing more and more Swiss rudiments like the pas de flaw, the inverted flam tap, the flam de mille, flam fives, Swiss Army triplet. Those sorts of things became commonplace in drum corps. I was speaking with Fred Johnson from Cadre last night, and I asked him, I said, when's the first time you ever saw a Swiss rudiment? And he said 1959-ish. So that's when we started learning about that. And Pratt brought in a whole team of drummers to West Point in the late 60s. It was very influential because it influenced Dennis DeLucia. So when we performed that Bridgman solo over a while ago, Pursuit, you might have seen frutta, 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 frutta. The kids call them cheeses today. We called them flittles back in the day in the Bridgman, but that's like a Swiss rudiment. We often wonder where the name cheese comes from. Some people speculate that since it was a Swiss rudiment, kind of like Swiss cheese, and it's just cheese for short, like, hey, let's just cheese those flam accents. So we started seeing all this vocabulary. So the Swiss influence was very important, and I'm going to perform a piece for you. That would have been funny. All right. This is called Tribute to Dr. Berger. I found this piece to be pretty challenging, but it has a nice lilt to it, and it incorporates a lot of Swiss rudiments, the flam five, the inverted flam tap, the Swiss Army triplet, pas de flaw flaw. So here is Tribute to Dr. Berger by John Pratt. All right. One of the gentlemen that was in attendance and a member of the Hellcats when the Swiss drummers came in, Alphonse Guider, was the outstanding Bill Putnam. And if you'd like to come up, Bill, and maybe you can share a little bit about the story. And one of the influences on Pratt is existing repertoire, Connecticut Halftime, things like that. And so what Pratt did is he put his own Pratt twist on the Connecticut Halftime, and he created the Hellcat Halftime. And Bill's going to perform that, but if you'd like to say a few words about what you remember from that experience with the Swiss drummers, that would be awesome. Dennis DeLucia sent me an email. He said he couldn't be here, but he distinctly remembers when the Swiss drummers came and how wide their eyes were at the new vocabulary that they were learning and how that affected his writing.
I had the pleasure in, I believe, 1969 to witness Alphonse Guider and two other individuals that were brought in from Basel, Switzerland to show us what actual Swiss drumming is like. Jaw-dropping performance. They played what we called, which was essentially a long roll that lasted for probably 20 minutes. But it went up and down hills. It went through curves. It went into tunnels that went from here to here. Never a waver, never anything. The Swiss rudiments that were put in place were absolutely phenomenal. And Jack brought them over to actually introduce us to what real Swiss drumming was. From the aspect of Jack and his somewhat idiosyncrasies, Jack was kind of well known for being a little left of center. I took my audition in 1967. I walked into the band building at West Point 50 years ago, just a couple of days ago. It's almost 50 years to the day that I walked in the band building and became a Hellcat. I was reunited with Jack then because Jack was my drum instructor when I was this big in Rochester, New York. Jack taught us many interesting lessons. Jack also taught us what you don't play is as important as what you do play. And one of the things that we learned very quickly in a concert at Trophy Point, those of you who are of that generation know Harold Green, lovely man. Harold, Jack, and I were chosen to play a solo called Sergeant Eli. I've asked Jeff to try to find it. I don't think, maybe we played it once and it was never played again. Similar to Connecticut Halftime, but it was 16 beats of ensemble. It was 16 beats of solo. So we would start out with 16 beats and we would go rum-pa-bum, rum-pa-bum, rum-pa-da-da-da, and Jack would walk out, play his 16, we'd ensemble, Jack played 16, we'd ensemble again for 32 bars, for 32 beats. And Jack, bless his heart, started playing perhaps in 11:19 time. Harold is standing next to me, and Jack just played anything that came to his head. Harold, next to me, all I heard was, oh no. The metronome was going off in Jack's head, the metronome was going off in my head. And I counted us back in just this extraordinary explosion of Pratt playing things that we couldn't figure out what he played. Called it back in, 3, 4, 4, 4. Boom. Ensemble, we all played our solos, we all finished, we marched down off the hill, down Trophy Point, and Harold Green says to Jack, "What did you play?" Jack says, "I don't know, whatever came to mind." but I know Bill was counting all the time. So it's important to, what you don't play is important as what you do play. So from the aspect of Connecticut Halftime, I would be very pleased to play for you Hellcat Halftime. This is dedicated to the drumline from 1950 to 1969. I am very proud to be a part of that group.
Thanks, Bill. idiosyncrasies of Pratt, a little left of center. Two quick funny stories. This is famous. Dennis DeLucia told me this. Robin Engelman had told me this story as well. One time, Pratt was on top of his roof in band quarters. So at West Point, there's two loops, and they're called Bandland. I happen to live in Bandland with my family, and Jack was one day up on the roof with the hose, and he's watering his lawn, and people are getting concerned because there's some weird guy on his roof calling the MPs and trying to figure out what's going on. So when they approached him, he said, "Shh, the grass thinks it's raining." So that's the mindset of this genius. Another interesting story was, because of his independent nature, sometimes the higher-ups at West Point did not care for that too much. So he would get called into the office several times. And one time, in the early 60s, he performed a lunch formation, and he was called in to the orderly room. He was like, "Oh, God, what did I do now?" He goes in there, and none other than Leopold Stokowski, the conductor of the Philadelphia Orchestra, you might know that name from the music behind Disney's Fantasia, was waiting in the orderly room. And he said, "Are you the gentleman that wrote those parts And all those drummers, they sounded like one drummer. How did you do that? And he had an extensive conversation with Leopold Stokowski, and that was one of his highlights of his time at West Point. He got complimented, and he showed Leopold how to draw the sound out, how to play into the head, and how to lift for the rolls. And Leopold was, oh, that's how you do it. Your rolls are so even, like a radiator resonating. So that was the terminology, the metaphor he used. So that was one of the highlights for Pratt, is his meeting of Leopold Stokowski. One of the interesting things about Pratt is that he took some time off from drumming to become an English teacher and to focus on his family. He felt like he had done so much teaching with the Caballeros, in particular, I think from like 72 to 81 or so. And during that time, they had an undefeated season. I believe it was in 73, and they won drums in 75. So he was teaching with George Tuthill at the time. And then he also judged a lot, and he felt like he needed to stay home more. So he kind of got out of drumming for a while. And then, like in the late 90s, he discovered fife and drum corps. And he started drumming with Bobby Thompson, and he started writing again. And in 1969, Fred Johnson had brought Pratt over to work with Cadre, and he wrote like 12 solos for Cadre. And when he went to one of these, they called them shakes, which is when these drums get together and they drum and have a sort of convention like this. He invited Pratt over, and Fred called Robin Engelman and said, hey, you need to come over and meet this guy. Robin shows up with this tattered old copy from 1959. And actually, I'm sorry, the year was 1999. It was 40 years later. And he was like, this is the book I learned Ginger Snap out of and all these solos. So that relationship began. And Robin Engelman really catapulted Pratt into the notoriety of the Percussive Art Society, where he eventually was inducted into the Hall of Fame. And Robin's favorite solo to perform with Pratt was Ginger Snap. And I'd like to bring aboard Andrew Porter, and he's going to tell you a little bit about Ginger Snap and perform that for you. Andrew?
Thank you very much. I'm going to try to get this up here without knocking everything off. My eyes aren't what they used to be. So, one thing that I love about this solo, as Jeff mentioned, it's Robin Engelman's favorite solo. And when I was a young student in college, we were lucky enough to have Mr. Engelman at Western Kentucky University along with the other members of Nexus. They came and visited and did a concert. And they had known my professor, Dr. Christopher Norton, there. And they all came out with rope drums. And this was actually the first time I had seen rope drums in person. And all 5 of the members played 3 camps. And it was a really fantastic sound, and it really sort of started my love for rudimental drumming kind of over again. I had always been a huge fan of drum corps, and the modern stuff that was going on in the mid-90s was sort of my jam. You know, that's what I wanted to do. But seeing the rope drums and hearing just the power of that with the 5 members of Nexus kind of awakened me to the other stuff in rudimental drumming. And the fact that I didn't know very much about rudimental drumming at all, even though I had studied it quite extensively. So one of the requirements for my degree was this book. And one of the solos that I actually had quite a bit of trouble with was Ginger Snap. It's deceptively difficult. It looks pretty easy when you start it, and then it just keeps getting harder and harder. And one of the things that's most difficult about it is the interpretation of the roughs or drags, whatever you prefer to call them. So what we do as a group in the Hellcats, we decide how we're going to interpret each one of these. Now, I know there are probably some people who think there's only one way to interpret a rhythmic cue, there's only one way to interpret this or that. We can argue about that all day long. What I will say is every performer who plays this will probably have a slightly different interpretation because it's just that intricate and honestly delicate to play. So what we do as a group, we actually have a video of this solo. If you'd like to go check it out, it's on YouTube. Of all 5 of us at the time, with Sergeant Major retired Eric Scheffler, all 5 of us playing this solo. We have decided that we basically have 3 different interpretations for these. We'll either play them slightly loose and slurred, so it's a little open, or we'll play them sort of more like a diddled 16th note. Or we'll play them what we call stylized, which is more like a concert interpretation, slightly tighter to primary note. So as I play this, you're going to hear various interpretations. It basically is performer's choice. So I'm going to make those choices and hope you enjoy it.
Okay, I see that we have about 11 minutes left. Do we want to start, or can we go over 3 or 4 minutes? All right, cool. We're going to go over about 3 or 4 or 5 minutes. That was awesome, Andrew. I really thought that sounded. You could hear the jum, 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 the duple, the triple feel in those 6/8. I call them 6/8 double drags. That was awesome. In the later years, Pratt started writing again in the 90s after he had been an English teacher for 25 years. From 1969 to 1995, he served as an English teacher at Hackensack High School in New Jersey. And he also served as an English teacher at a community college. And the last year that he taught, he was the Distinguished Teacher of the Year at that community college. So his standards were always high. Dennis DeLucia sent me an email and said that Pratt was one of the most intellectually brilliant men he has ever met. Pratt could speak for hours on any subject fluently. And he was well-read and just an incredible intellectual. And he's an amazing influence to us. In one of his later books, Pratt says that his favorite solo is The Conquering of the Legions of Rome, and Sergeant Cuthbert's going to perform that. Sergeant Cuthbert's currently playing bass drum for us on our solos. Last year I played bass drum. We're rotating currently until we can hire someone. Sergeant Major Scheffler had retired, and we had a hold on freeze on hiring for a while, but now our commander last week gave me the great news that we can go ahead and put out a flyer and hire another drummer. So please spread the word. Amen, brother. So that's the answer to my prayers for a long time, is to get another drummer. It relieves the workload, and also we can do more creative things. So put the word out there, and we'll be looking for a drummer soon. Sergeant Cuthbert, you want to talk about the Conquering Legions of Rome?
Hey, good afternoon. One of the things, this solo was dedicated to Ken Green of New Windsor, New York. So just putting that in perspective. I'm going to mostly let this solo speak for itself. I'll just speak briefly on it. What I've enjoyed about it, this is a new discovery for me, so to speak. I hadn't played this until we decided we were going to come here. We were looking, we saw that Pratt said this was his favorite solo, so I decided to look at it, and it's good to find something new in Pratt's works, and I really enjoyed this one. What I felt is of course it's his favorite one. It's completely over the top as far as syncopation and playing over the bar lines, and he writes it all in 2/4 time signature, but it's not in 2/4 through the whole thing. There's different time signatures hinted throughout the piece. Just as a choice to do something different, I'm playing it on our 16-inch drums rather than our larger 17-inch drums. So this is the Conquering Legions of Rome.
Real quick about the audition and what we expected in Hellcat. Willie alluded to the 140 things that we played in our audition. When we audition for the Hellcats, it's a very long audition because you're expected to be able to play rudimental drums, but you're expected to be able to, on a moment's notice, perform as a professional level concert percussionist with the concert band, should the piece require additional percussionists beyond their 5, or if someone gets sick or has a child or something like that. We've each all been called the day before, laid in one rehearsal, and then I think Andrew sight read or played timpani on Lincolnshire Posey for a concert after no rehearsals ever. Sight read the whole concert, and they had like a world premiere piece by Mackey, was it? Yeah, we started out with a timpani solo. It was crazy. I was like, good luck, man.
I'll play the rhythms, that's all you get.
Yeah, it's like, yeah. So anyway, that level of professional percussion, most performers have masters, doctorates, at least in undergrad. So we're looking for a highly qualified rudimental drummer that's a great musician. If you can play drum sets, steel drums, the more the merrier. If you can make videos, do computer work, photography, like any skill set you can bring, the Army will use it. That's what we need. So put the word out there. Okay, so moments ago we talked about how Pratt was an English teacher in ancient literature, and he was the president, there's your room key, Andrew. He was the president of the New Jersey Poets Society, Jeff Michael. And a few weeks ago when we found out our time was going to be extended here to a full hour, Jeff Michael was in the process of picking out his all-state level snare drum solo that his band director tasked him to do, and he brought the list home, and on the list, thankful to Warren Benson, many, many years ago in the 1950s, Warren Benson put that on the New York State list. He lives in New York. He picks Moby Dick. Moby Dick is a great example of the literary influence on Pratt, and pays tribute to the characters in Moby Dick. Each section is a specific character. So I threw this on Jeff Michael about 3 weeks ago, And on top of him trying to work out his individual solo, I peer pressured him into playing this with me. Can you hold this for a minute? Several things surprised me about this solo. Number one, it was pretty hard. I'm not going to lie to you. Can you hold this microphone? I'm going to come over here and show. There's a few techniques I had never done in my life, and here's one of them. It's a Swiss Army triplet. It's a Radanicube, but with a Swiss Army triplet, releasing with a flam, and then a drag on the same hand. So a same hand flam drag. I'll demonstrate it to you. It looks like this. You got, there's your Swiss sticking right up, ends with a flam, same hand drag. So I had to get those in my hands. That was pretty hard to do. And then he inserts these roughs, these drags, in the middle of things like. So he just inserts them in there. If you've ever played orchestral percussion, Scheherazade, there's a lick that goes like this. Where you have to insert the rough. It kind of reminds me of that. There's a lick where he throws them on the right hand. He throws them on the left. So that took a little while. So this is still a work in progress. He's got about another month before he tries out for all states. So we're going to perform this together and see what happens. Moby Dick. And this is dedicated to Robin Engelman. Your 2018 U.S. Junior National Champion, Jeff Prosperie. Okay, we're going to wrap it up. There's so much more to talk about, Pratt. This project, we're putting this clinic together, is inspiring. It inspired me because it's just a great family man, great judge, great instructor, great intellectual, great drummer, great composer. He's great. Jack Pratt is freaking great. Can I hear it for Jack Pratt? And I'm just proud to wear this uniform, knowing that Pratt wore this uniform. We're going to close with a piece that we wrote. Sergeant Cuthbert Bill wrote it, called Logical Progression. Then I tagged on something that I wrote called Relevancy. This is our art form. We all know that. We all love it. There's various parts of our art form. Rudimental drumming is all-encompassing. It's Scottish, it's Swiss, it's French, it's ancient, it's modern, it's Kevlar, it's calfskin, it's orchestrally bent, it's jazz, drum set, it's everything. And we just appreciate it all. And this solo is inspired by all those facets, especially the latest wave you'll see at the end, bios. Anybody here bios? Bring your own style. Go on YouTube, check it out, pop in bios, and you're gonna see two African-American guys playing the craziest visuals and all kinds of stuff. One of them, Harvey Hart, teaches at Cold Steel, one of the historically black colleges, that's his drumline. Ralph Nader marched in the Blue Devils. And I did a clinic with these guys at Pancakes a couple of years ago, and this old dog learned some new tricks, I'm going to tell you, they were kind of hard. So we're going to throw that in towards the end. You'll see some bios, influence stuff. Imagine if Ed Limley in 1934, when he wrote Crazy Army, had the visual palette that there is today from guys like bios. Bill, you want to talk a little bit about the part you wrote?
So this solo logical progression, I wrote off of the Pratt solo Ginger Snap is the beginning of it. And what I was looking for is that I'd never seen a drumline really try to stylize, play roughs, explore the intricacies of that ornament and what to do with it. And so I wrote this to do that, and then also to bridge a gap and show some lineage through drum solos. So it starts off with a tribute to Jack Pratt, and then we move on towards a little bit more modern to the Mitch Markovich, the Winner, Stamina, those types of quotes in there. And then we move forward more in time to the 90s drum corps scene, which is where the three of us found our heyday. So there's a lot of flam rudiments, triplets at 148, and then we move forward into the 2000s where the tempos began to crank up more and more, so the roll speed paradiddle became a mainstay in the art form, and that's where my solo ends, and then we move into today with the BYOS stick trick portion.
Cool. Logical progression into relevancy. again, just very thankful for the experience, and best wishes for a great evening.
A lot of drumming, right?